My name is Karolina Iwan ska, and I'm really happy that you came to this session, which, as you probably realized, is a little bit different than other sessions at this conference, and it even has its own tag, human rights. I haven't seen any other one with this tag. And indeed, today I want to talk to you about technology, but from the slightly different perspective, from the perspective of its impact on people's rights and freedoms, in particular the right to privacy. So I'm a lawyer and I work at Panoptykon Foundation, which is a Polish NGO based in Warsaw, whose mission is to protect human rights in the context of growing surveillance. And we talk to politicians and regulators, we lobby for good laws that protect people. We bring lawsuits and complaints, I'm going to talk about that in a second, in some strategic cases. And we engage in dialogue with business, with regular users, we educate them, we expose violations and the real stakes of our current data economy. And if that name rings a bell, then if you were here last year, perhaps you saw my colleague Kasia talking about the GDPR and what it's about, and what is the role of engineers, of software developers in GDPR. And today I'm going to continue this conversation that she started last year. But so I'm still going to talk about data. I'm still going to talk about power imbalances between people and technology. And I'm going to focus on one particular issue, on one particular use case of data, which is serving people personalized ads. And so before I start, I want to say that sometimes it's very difficult to find a common language between the tech community and lawyers or human rights activists like me. Even though we deal with the same things, we deal with them from very different angles. And that's why we have different languages. And the reason why I'm here is to try to close this gap, perhaps a little bit. So I'm here also to learn as much from you and from your insights, as perhaps to tell you something interesting from my perspective, from the perspective of human rights. So I will leave a lot of time at the end of this presentation for discussion, for comments, for questions, because I imagine my presentation might spark some controversy, perhaps. I hope so, at least. So looking forward to that. Okay, so over the last 2 years, I've been investigating, looking into the mysterious world of online advertising. And more recently with the support from Mozilla Foundation, because I'm a policy fellow at Mozilla Foundation, where I look at the human rights implications of online advertising systems. And there's no doubt that we function in an ad-supported internet. This is the dominant way to monetize content, from websites with cat memes, through established publishers, news publishers, to apps and social media platforms. And most of this advertising is served in an automated way and is driven by data about people's behaviors, their online activity. It seems to benefit everyone, right? Publishers get paid for the content they create, so they have more money to create more content. Advertisers can reach relevant audiences with their products and services, and people can access news for free, whatever, regardless of whether they're rich or poor. It sounds like a win-win, right? But today I'd like to stir it up a little bit and throw in maybe a couple of observations that go against this win-win narrative and look at the privacy and human-related challenges in the world of online advertising. So over the past decade, we've seen immense growth in terms of digital ad spend. Only over the last 5 years, the numbers doubled. Reaching over $300 billion globally in 2009 and putting so far dominant television ads far behind. Over the years, we've also seen a mass growth in the number of various intermediaries, various companies on this market, whose role is to support the two key players, so publishers and advertisers, with various technical elements of serving ads. Publishers understood as websites, media, blogs, who have an audience, some visitors to their website, who have content that they want to monetize, and who have some advertising space. And advertisers who have obviously products and services to offer to relevant people. And according to some people from the media industry that I talked to, the reason why this landscape evolved so much, it was in the first place because of some kind of ignorance on the side of publishers. So when they first started their online presence, when, I don't know, the New York Times had their first website in 1996, I think. So when they started their online presence, they were kind of ignorant about that world, because back then print was still good, print was still bringing profit, it was still benefiting them very well. So they saw a lot of white spaces on these websites and they wanted to accommodate them somehow, but they didn't really want to deal with that because, as I said, they weren't, according to some people, innovative enough to look into the future and realize that at some point the sales will start, the print sales will start dropping. And so they, and so that made it possible for the first intermediaries to emerge. And that market grew very fast, going from approximately 150 actors in 2011 to over 7,000 in just 8 years. And this was made possible also by the growing automation of serving ads, especially the development of a process called real-time bidding that was, I think, designed in 2009, and which is this part of the advertising world is what I want to focus on today. But before I get into that, it's estimated that 86% of automated programmatic ad delivery in Europe is based on behavioral data about people. And the role of intermediaries is to collect this data, these digital traces that people leave behind them as they navigate the web, and turn them into useful information. Useful meaning valuable. So preferably something that people haven't revealed themselves, but rather the interpretations of their behavior. And if you were here last year, my colleague talked a bit more about how we see this digital profile. So what we share ourselves as people, then what our behavior tells about us, and then the level of inferences, interpretations about that behavior. So this is what's really interesting in the world of advertising. But it makes obviously sense from the point of economy, from the point of companies. But for users, it's often very confusing. It's often very difficult. Nowadays, they more or less understand that nothing is free online, that they do pay with their attention, that they pay with their data. But they do know that there is something like cookies. They know that they are not wholly anonymous. But they don't know exactly what are these complex technical processes that happen behind the stages. And this anxiety is also leading to people's perceptions of ads in general. Very often people say that targeted ads violate their privacy because they feel powerless, they feel they don't have control over it, and they feel they don't know enough about it. And because of that, they choose in some kind of false, perhaps conviction that ad blockers block not only ads but also tracking. They install ads and ad blockers. And as far as I know, in Poland there are over 40% of internet users block ads, which I think puts us on the podium in Europe. I think we are third or something like that. And so. Privacy, in my opinion, privacy and human rights risks related to online advertising appear or emerge from the way that these systems have been designed. So let us take a quick look at how real-time bidding works. I know that some of you might be working in that might be designing these systems. So this GIF looks like a 2-year-old drawing for a painter, but it's very simplified, I know. But let's take a look at this simple version of how real-time bidding works, the basic dynamics of that system. So basically, every time I go to a website, my personal data is then my personal data, my identifier, my cookie ID, served by the publisher, goes to the so-called supply-side platform, whose role is to manage the publisher's ad inventory, so people who visit the website and available ad slots. The SSP then sends the so-called bid request containing that data, containing my identifier, to the ad exchange, where a virtual action takes place. Sometimes this information is sent to several ad exchanges at the same time to maximize the possibility that there will be a buyer who's interested in this ad inventory. The ad exchange then sends these bid requests to a number of so-called demand-side platforms who work for advertisers and whose aim is to verify whether this particular impression, that this particular person fits somehow to the campaigns that they are at the moment running for the advertiser. In order to do that, they often match the user ID they received from the ad exchange against their own databases or against the databases of companies that they cooperate with, looking for additional information about the user. And thanks to this exchange, they may know, for example, that I am interested in cats, for example, and that I visited a particular website recently, as well as approximately what age I am, where I'm at the moment, what my location. And afterward, on the basis of that information, they make a decision and they place a bid on this, just like in an old-fashioned auction, on this impression, hoping to win the possibility to show the right ad to the right person at the right time and in the right place. So the ad exchange selects the winning bid and transmits the good news back to the SSP together with the ad creative and usually a tracking code, and only then I, as a user, see the ad. And all that process takes less than 200 milliseconds, so less than a blink of an eye, and is supported by, is automated, it's fully automated. It's supported by algorithms from creating a user profile to determining the bidding price and the winner of the auction. So that's a brief overview, and now let's go to the interesting stuff. I propose that we look at this world in the context of a couple of GDPR principles. So GDPR, as some of you may know, is the European Data Protection Regulation that has been in place for 2 years. And I don't want to get very deep into these particular principles, but these are the ones that we are going to test real-time bidding against. So let's start with lawfulness. Lawfulness is a principle that means that you have to have a legal ground to process data. And there is a closed catalog of these legal grounds that the controller can use. There are 6 of them. Yeah, something like that. 7 maybe? I'm not sure anymore. But for example, you can process data when it's necessary to providing a service to someone. So when you're a bank, you can of course process people's transactions, right? Very often, you will also ask for consent when you cannot find any other appropriate legal basis. You will ask for people's consent, and this is what happens very often in the online advertising world. Advertisers feel they cannot say that their services that they provide is advertising, because I would assume that people wouldn't buy into that, although Facebook tries to do so. So they very often collect consent. And very often when we say, there are legal challenges to real-time bidding, they say, but you consented to this. But the thing is that what very often is called consent is not consent under GDPR. Because under GDPR, consent has to be free and informed, among other criteria. And so when it comes to free consent, as a user, you cannot be nudged in any way. You have to have a free choice to say yes or no. But when we go to a random website, very often, now less than before, but still there are situations like that, where we see something like that, where we see a pop-up box that is designed in a way that makes it very difficult not to consent. Because to find consent, to find the way not to consent, you have to probably click at more, go a couple of clicks deeper, through the layers of legal or technical jargon, and only then perhaps you will have the chance to manually opt out of 400 trusted partners. While giving consent is very easy. Usually there's a huge green button saying I accept, and also something, closing a pop-up that seems to be intuitive, right? I don't want to see that, I don't consent, is also very often interpreted as consent. So this is problematic in our opinion. In our opinion, these are dark patterns in design that make this consent not free. People are nudged towards consenting. But even if we design the most beautiful pop-up, even if we design, you know, 2 gray boxes, I don't agree, I agree, nothing, no dark patterns in this, consent also has to be informed. And being informed means knowing the consequences of consenting. And when the ecosystem is so complex that it takes lawyers, even like someone who works with technology as I do, you know, 2 years to really like understand what more or less is going on, then I assume that, you know, an average person, an average user will never know what are the consequences of them giving consent. So I argue, and this is perhaps a controversial argument, that however we design this pop-up, this consent will never be informed. There is no way a person can ever know about the consequences of consenting. So now let's look at data minimization. Data minimization is a principle that says that you only can process data that is necessary for this particular purpose that you have. And when we look into what goes into the bid request, so what is sent to the ad exchange and then further to various intermediaries, we will see that there are quite a lot of very sensitive information. So there is a page URL, so the page that I'm currently looking at, which may in itself be quite sensitive, like I might be reading about, I don't know, symptoms of pregnancy or something. Then we have the distinctive information about person's device, so exactly what kind of device they're using, which makes it very difficult, very easy to already infer perhaps how wealthy this person is. If they have a, you know, super design, kind of newest iPhone bought one day after the, you know, premiere, that may mean that they are quite either, you know, gadget obsessed or quite wealthy. Then we have when we have the IP address, we have also very precise GPS coordinates, and sometimes often even zip code, which, for example, in the US might tell you a lot about the demographics of this person. Then we also have particular segments that this person was classified into, their interests, which also may be quite sensitive. And it's estimated that 84% of data, it's not in the context of RTB, I don't know if there are any data about this in terms of RTB, but in general, it's estimated that 84% of data collected about people is never used. So only 16% of data collected about people is used. That may change thanks to machine learning that will make it possible to do something with this data. But at the moment, it's, to me, clear that data minimization principle is also, to some extent, broken. And it has also been described in detail by the American professor Shoshana Zuboff in her recent book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, when she calls it behavioral surplus. So collecting data about people's behaviors, you know, just in case, because maybe at some point they will be useful, goes against this principle. Now when it comes to purpose limitation is a principle that says that you should define the purpose for which you're collecting data and not change this purpose without asking people or telling them about this and having a legal ground for it. And so just one of the examples of violating this principle is when we look into what Google does with cookies and data from Google Analytics, for example. You would say, oh, that's only for measuring, you know, statistics on a website. It serves publishers. They want to know how many times people read an article. But in fact, Google uses this data for enriching people's profiles and for targeting ads on their own services on the basis of that data. For example, on YouTube on YouTube mostly. Okay, now when it comes to transparency, which is a kind of principle that we at Panopticon take care about the most because it allows people to be informed about what is going on with their data. So transparency has 2 levels, I would say. First, there is a general level, which means that in general I have to understand what is happening here, what kind of processing is going on, and what are the consequences of this processing. But then there is also an individual level. GDPR gives everybody the right of access, the right to access their individual data. Not only a general information, oh, we process your data for advertising purposes, but concretely, what kind of data, And because of the fact that that personal data is a very broad term, basically anything that can be linked to a person is a personal data. If this bottle is standing here next to me and you kind of know that it's mine, then this bottle is also my personal data. My ownership over that bottle, the information that I own this bottle is also my personal data. So the definition is very broad. And so also inferences, interferences, also the interpretations of my behaviors is my personal data as well. And they don't have to be true. They don't have to be true. Even though they may be false, they are still my personal data. And so we tried to get access to that data. 2 years ago, we did an experiment where we asked 20 data brokers and 20 companies from that ecosystem about our profiles, basically. We provided them with our cookies. We provided them with our IPs, other information about us that were installed on our computers, and we asked them, show me my profile. And what we received is something like that, if we received it. So if we received that data, first of all, very often it's very difficult, first of all, to identify the right companies. Who is the company behind that cookie? How to find cookies in the first place, right? Second of all, even when companies, when we identify the company might often say, cookie is not personal data. Cookie identifies your device and not you. Or we don't have that cookie. I don't know why it's on your computer. Or I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know that cookie. But if we do get the data, very often it looks like this. It looks incomprehensible from the point of view of an average person. If you say that this doesn't level the playing field, the user is as much in the dark as they were before. Now we're coming to security. So security principle is there in place to provide protection from data leaks. But in this system, there seems to be that there are quite a lot of data leaks. Why? Because once the website sends people's data to the ad exchange, they lose control over it. There are no technical means of saying other actors, oh, stop processing that data. There are only contractual obligations in place that are not sufficient. For example, one example of this contractual obligation is that's part of the Google Authorized Buyers Guidelines, and that they say that only the winner of an ad auction can keep people's data in order to enrich their profiles for the future. But in fact, sources, I don't know if that happens, if that is violated, because I don't work there. But sources from the industry tell us that it's just a contractual obligation. There is no way that Google can even verify this unless they invade your offices and check out your servers. There is no way for the user to know for sure that someone deleted their data or that the data is not there. And in fact, sources within the industry say that quite a lot of data brokers take part in ad auctions only to gain access to people's data without any intention to win the given auction. I don't know what's the scale of problem. I see you nodding, and you work in this industry, so I take it as I'll write it down on my website that it's confirmed now, anonymously confirmed. But I'm glad that it's not as I'm always very kind of scared of saying these things are not really proven, but I'm glad that it's not the case here. Okay, so when it comes to the principle of privacy by design and privacy by default, so these are two principles. The principle of privacy by design says that while designing the system in which data will be processed, from the very beginning, so even from the stage of conceptualizing it, of making business decisions, people's personal data protection has to be taken into account, and controllers have to make sure that their data is protected to the highest possible degree. People also should be protected by default, which means that they don't have to go to some settings in order to be protected. They don't have to click anywhere else. I want to, somewhere in their browser. I want to be protected. But in fact, I will give you a few examples of that. Of the fact that advertising systems haven't really been designed in a way that is human-centric and haven't been designed in a way that protects people's personal data by default and by design. One example of this is the failed experiment of Do Not Track. So the standard that was put in place, I know a person who took part in the working group and they spent 10 years of their life on this and they feel like, you know, they wasted their lives. Because the Do Not Track was there to be a simple signal that a user sends, I do not wish to be tracked. But in fact, it's rarely respected. So when the browser sends the Do Not Track signal, not a lot of websites respect it. And if they do, they might think that, oh, but maybe they changed their mind. Let's show them the pop-up still. And because it's so difficult not to give consent in that pop-up, you know what happens. Another example could be that companies taking part in ad auctions, they cannot opt out of receiving the data. So we know we're talking to a company that does contextual advertising, and they are a DSP, and they bid on. They are both the DSP and SSP, so they also represent publishers, and they do not have a choice to opt out of receiving data from bid requests. They don't need this data because they only do contextual advertising, which is not data-driven. And they have no option of opting out of receiving that data, which is completely not privacy by design. Then another example could be that Google's advertising settings for publishers, by default, accepts all partners, all advertising partners. So if the publisher doesn't select or opt out of particular partners, all of them are included. So that means that people's personal data will go to more actors, instead of allowing publishers to pick and select from that list. And of course, from users' perspective, there is no easy way to access that data. There's no global interface of accessing that data, and they have no easy way of controlling it. And I would say that it's not really a wonder that this system, having been designed with privacy at the center, at the core, after all, they were created before these principles became law. And they were created long before 2016 when GDPR went into effect. After GDPR, companies should have looked into those systems and assessed them whether we are still compliant. And I feel, and make necessary changes when it's needed. And I feel that it hasn't really happened, at least not in a meaningful way. Compliance with the GDPR is not importantly only for the sake of it, right? We don't comply with GDPR, companies perhaps do, but in general, GDPR is there to address the problems of power imbalances between people and companies, where companies have much more information about what is going on with people's data. And GDPR is there to address it, to level the playing field, and to manage the asymmetry of information that is going on. But the opacity inherent to behavioral advertising makes it possible for people's vulnerabilities to be exploited, because there's no control over it, individual control on the part of user. Especially that all the ad delivery processes are automated. And algorithms themselves are not free of bias. Especially also that there are significant consequences for our digital media ecosystem in general. So the rise of clickbait content, hoax publishers who abuse these systems, who abuse the weaknesses that it has to fund fake news or hate speech. So we have a lot of ad fraud, for example, going on, where brands like Coca-Cola, big established brands, support with their money, terrorist content, or And the World Federation of Advertisers, for example, estimates that by 2025, ad fraud will reach $50 billion, which will be the second only to drug traffic. The second kind of highest source of profit for organized crime. And then we also have Adtech tax, that the percentage of money that is spent by advertisers on a given ad, it looks like only 30%, from 50 to 30%, go to the publisher, who is supposed to benefit from that system. So 70%, The Guardian did that experiment, 70% is kind of lost on the way. And not to mention the significant carbon footprint of collecting all of that and gathering and storing vast amounts of data. A paper from 2016 estimated that carbon footprint at the equivalent of 60 million flights between London and New York. So therefore, the challenges which result from this opacity that is inherent to how the system is designed is far greater than just GDPR compliance. But verifying each individual company, whether they are, what they do with personal data, seems like an endless task, seems like a nightmare. Despite the fact that there are so many actors in this ecosystem, there are in fact really two systems and two standard setters that organize this environment. So the first one is the Interactive Advertising Bureau, who develops the Open RTB standards. And the second one is Google with their Authorized Buyers program. And most of these companies, probably all, participate in either of the two or both. And so the Google and IAB are de facto standard setters. Individual companies do not really have the power to change how things work, because if they, say, change what goes into the bid request, it's just very likely they will not get any bids, or if they bid without knowing about other people's data, they will just lose the auction. And so this is why, looking at these legal faults that I talked about, these challenges for privacy, at Panopticon we decided to join complaints against these two standard setters, so Google and the Interactive Advertising Bureau. The complaints were first brought in 2018 in the UK and in Ireland, and we joined them in January last year in Poland, and so far they have also been brought in 15 European member states. As a result of this, the British and the Irish data protection authorities started their investigations into the Adtech industry. And the UK Data Protection Authority, the Information Commissioner's Office, published quite a harsh report in June 2019, saying stuff like that there is a lack of maturity of some market participants when it comes to data protection, that they have general systemic concerns around the level of compliance of real-time bidding. So it feels like there is some sort of already common understanding between the regulators and the civil society that there are problems. And I went to the ICO event in November in London, and there was a bunch of civil society people and a huge amount of people working for Adtech. And they didn't question the facts. They didn't question the fact that, that there's an over-reliance on contracts, that sensitive data might be processed without the right legal basis, without consent, that there is problems with data minimization, that there is not enough transparency towards people and towards the supply chain, within the supply chain as well. So it seems to be only a matter of time when there are some decisions from data protection authorities, and they are not going to be good for the Adtech world, and they are going to influence changes, perhaps some drastic ones. So, what can be done about it, right? So, if there are so many problems, in my opinion, what can be done about RTB? And do we need only just cosmetic fixes that you as developers could introduce? Or do we need some bigger design solutions? Or do we need an entire redesigning of the system? My research into that leads me to think that these cosmetic fixes will not be enough, because the problems that stem from the design of the systems are not only about security, and I feel that they will not be enough. At least I cannot imagine any cosmetic fixes that would fix the scale of the problem, but I'm of course open to your suggestions, because I don't have that kind of imagination that you do when it comes to what can be done. So my sad constatation probably would be, which I hope that you will question, because I don't want to have that sad constatation, that the role of individual companies and the role of individual engineers and developers is very limited here. That it's the organizers of the system that have to act, probably incentivized in a negative way by regulators. It also very often comes down to business decisions on the side of publishers. For example, them switching to contextual advertising only. Or, I don't know, just changing their model from being ad-supported to being subscription-supported. And this is why, as part of my fellowship with Mozilla, apart from looking at the implications of the existing system, I'm also going to map potential alternatives that are out there already, contextual advertising being the obvious one, because it's kind of in its revival phase at the moment. A lot of people are talking, at least, maybe not doing, but talking about this idea. So if you are developing perhaps some of these solutions, or if you know of any solutions that could be interesting, please reach out to me, and let's stay in touch. There is our website, panopticon.org. You can also follow me on Twitter for contact, for updates, and there's my email if you're interested. And if you're working in Poland and you identify with our mission, we would really greatly appreciate it if you considered donating, supporting our work with your 1% of tax, which tomorrow, I heard that it opens. So good timing. All right, thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. This is a very important topic that you brought up, so I'm really curious what's the audience take on it?
Thank you. You said that there might be some big changes coming up, but what do you feel, why are we waiting for this? Because I kind of don't understand. GDPR has been in effect for a long time. When you look at it and you look at reality, it's like we banned alcohol, but everyone around you is drunk all the time. And it's just, you know, what's the reason for this? Are we waiting for countries to implement local versions of the law? Do we not have enough inspectors? Are the courts taking a long time to process? What's the problem?
I have a theory for that. So my theory is that regulators are a little bit afraid to regulate in this area because of the fact that they feel that they will break the internet, so to speak. So they're afraid that, you know, if everybody is doing it this way, and if there is such a vibrant industry, that's the words of the British regulator, if there is such a vibrant industry behind this ecosystem, then what will happen to that ecosystem? Will we as users have to pay for content now? And I think that regulators have to, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, paying for content, but I do kind of appreciate this argument that, you know, people who have more, you know, whose priority is more just to buy food will not pay for Facebook or something like that. But I think regulators are also kind of waiting for evidence that alternative models are possible. And there are alternatives already in place, but the problem is that because of the dominance of data-driven advertising, these alternatives cannot scale up. They cannot scale up enough to provide convincing evidence and that they are sustainable in the long run. And in my opinion, this is what blocks regulators. But it's a vicious circle because these alternatives, in my opinion, will not scale up without kind of incentives from the regulator. So it's a vicious circle that I personally don't yet know how to work with. But as a bigger group of NGOs united in the European Digital Rights Initiative, we're planning to do something about it. So stay tuned.
Thank you for the presentation. I have one personal question. Have you ever pressed a decline button on the pop-up?
I tried. I mean, if it's fairly easy, so when we have I agree, I don't agree, I always don't agree. So for example, Quantcast, I think, has this fairly simple pop-up. But when we have the one that I showed at the beginning of the presentation, it's very difficult to do that because first of all, you have to be really determined. You have to have time to do that. You have to, not want to go to this article right now because I need it. If I don't have time, then I don't want to go through all that bother, all that hassle in finding this decline button. And when I do, then obviously, for technical reasons, it will appear again and again and again the minute I change the website because, well, it doesn't know me because I didn't consent to placing cookies, so it doesn't know me. I think it's like understandable why it's there, but it's annoying. It's very annoying, and I feel that you have to really be determined to do that. And I personally don't think that we should put that burden on users. It should be private. There is privacy by default, which means the burden is not on me, on the user, but it's on the company.
Yeah, but then it will be no content by default for the user.
Why?
I mean, if you're not agreeing by default, and that's actually the way how the company is making money, so
yeah,
there will be no content from the publisher for you.
Well, if they choose cookie walls, which may be banned, because there is another law apart from GDPR, we have e-privacy regulation that is currently in review. It's stuck in the European Council. In the European Council. But in the first version of e-privacy regulation, there was a ban on cookie walls, which means a cookie wall is I'm sure that is like when people don't agree, they cannot enter a website. They don't have access to it. But there was supposed to be a ban on cookie walls, and I understand your concern of websites not being able to make money, but this is exactly what I'm saying. Behaviorally targeted advertising has been here for like 10 years, and before that, somehow, there was advertising. There are other ways of doing advertising. There are also other ways of monetizing content online. There is an initiative about some like micropayments. There are a lot of ideas out there, but I feel they cannot scale up because of the fact that the dominant model is as it is.
But cookie is a general technology to identify the user. So for example, if you pay for the content, it's also the way for the company to identify that you're actually the person who paid for it.
Sure.
So you cannot simply just regulate the usage of a cookie, because this will affect all the identification, even like properly used one.
If someone wants to answer.
GDPR doesn't say I'm not going to allow all cookies. If you click more, you will always get, I do not allow cookies to be used for advertising. Mm-hmm. I do not allow these cookies to be used to track me. I allow these cookies to, I allow this site to have cookies so that it can work. And when you said that this always pops up, it shouldn't, because this is a functionality of the site, and a cookie should be able to track that you already clicked I don't consent to the advertisers.
Yes.
We are not saying black and white here on I'm not allowing any cookies on any website anywhere. It's just like, don't use cookies to track what I am doing on your website, and don't send that to third-party people. Like your website can do whatever it wants with the cookies.
Yes,
I'm really sorry, I need to cut this discussion now. Please take it offline.
Okay, feel free to, I'm staying until 6.